Welcome to Now. We take a break this week from politics and public affairs to enter the strange and wonderful world of Maurice Sendak. Millions of us have already been there with a passport stamped by a virtuoso of the imagination. No one does children's stories like Maurice Sendak, over 100 books in all. He's won nearly every major prize for children's literature, plus the National Medal of Arts. No wonder. Just look at these titles. In the Night Kitchen, Higgledy Piggledy Pop, Outside Over There, Chicken Soup with Rice, and of course, the most loved and most famous of all, Where the Wild Things Are. Our own tattered copy is a Moyer's family keepsake. We read it to our children when it was first published 40 years ago. We've read it to our grandchildren in the last decade, and we fully expect that one day they will be reading it to their grandkids too. But let me share a Sendak secret with you. A 7-year-old hearing this story couldn't have more fun than a 70-year-old reading it. Where the Wild Things Are is ageless and timeless. For defying his mother, mischievous Max in his white wolf suit is sent to bed without his supper. But strange things happen in his room and in his fantasies, and Max is soon off to where the wild things are. They're no match for a kid with courage, and when he stands up to them, as he did to his mother, Max is crowned their king and leads his subjects in a wild rumpus that ends only when he sends them off to bed without their supper. But conquest is no cure for a homesick heart, and Max sails back to his very own room, and lo and behold, to a waiting hot supper. My friend Joseph Campbell once told me long before I met you that one of the great moments in literature is this scene in Where the Wild Things Are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they reared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all and made him king of all wild things. Joseph Campbell went and got that and read it to me. And he said that is a great moment because it's only when a man tames his own demons that he becomes the king of himself, if not of the world. And he said that was a great moment.
That's very moving. I did not
But
know.
you were just making it up.
I was just making it up.
A long time ago.
Long time ago. I was 32 when I did that book. But if he's right, that's a wonderful and touching idea.
But don't you believe this true? I mean, don't we all, adults and children, have to come to grips with our own untamed passions?
Oh, yes. We're animals. We're violent. We're criminal. We're not so far away from the gorillas and the apes, those beautiful creatures. So, of course, and then we're supposed to be civilized. We're supposed to go to work every day. We're supposed to be nice to our friends and send Christmas cards to our parents. We're supposed to do all these things which trouble us deeply because it's so against what we naturally would want to do. And if I've done anything, I've had kids express themselves as they are, impolitely, lovingly. They don't mean any harm. They just don't know what the right way is. And as it turns out, sometimes the so-called right way is utterly the wrong way. What a monstrous confusion.
Is writing books like this something like guerrilla warfare?
Yes, that's well said. Because you're really fighting yourself all the way along the line. And I don't know, I never set out to write books for children. I don't have a feeling that I'm going to save children or my life is devoted. I'm not Hans Christian Andersen. No one's going to make a statue in the park with a lot of scrambling kids climbing up me. I won't have it. Okay? So what is it? And I got a clue. I was watching a channel on television, and they had Christa Ludwig, who is a great opera singer, back. I saw her in Europe. She's now retiring. And then she had a surprising interview at the end of the concert where the guy, she said, "It's so good now." And then he said, "But why do you like Schubert? You always sing Schubert." And he sort of faintly condemned Schubert. You know, he's so simple, just the Viennese waltzes. And she smiled and she said, I don't know. She said, "Schubert is so big, so delicate." But what he did was pick a form that looked so humble and quiet so that he could crawl into that form and explode emotionally, find every way of expressing every emotion in this miniature form. And I got very excited, and I wondered Is it possible that's why I do children's books? I picked a modest form, which was very modest back in the 50s and the 40s. I mean, children's books were the bottom end of the totem pole. We didn't even get invited to grown-up book parties at Harper's.
And men didn't do it. I mean, it was a woman's world, wasn't it?
It's a woman's world.
Yeah, men were not supposed to enter the
and
child.
And you would suspect. You would suspect the minute you were at a party. What do you do? I do books for children. Ah, I'm sure my wife would like to talk to you. It was always that way. It was always. And then when we succeeded, that's when they dumped the women. Because once there's money, the guys can come down and screw the whole thing up, which is what they did. They ruined the whole business. Because I remember those days, and they were absolutely so beautiful. But my thought was, that's what I did. I didn't have much confidence in myself, never. And so I hid inside, like Krista was saying, this modest form called the children's book, and expressed myself entirely. I wasn't going to paint, and I wasn't going to do ostentatious drawings. I wasn't going to have gallery pictures. I was going to hide somewhere where nobody would find me and express myself entirely. I'm like a guerrilla warfare in my best books.
Why did you write Where the Wild Things Are?
I don't know. I don't have an answer. Let me tell you of its origins, brief. I had done a series of books, and in those days, back in the 50s, you couldn't do a picture book unless you'd done a number of books that paid off somewhat, or at the very least showed that you had more talent and you can move on to the next. There's not much money back then. I don't think Madonna would have been interested in writing a book in the 50s, okay? So it was my turn. I had earned my 10 years apprenticeship of doing any number of books. Now I could do a book. And my editor's name was Ursula Nordstrom, and she, without equivocation, was the best. She was just a torrential woman, passionate woman, who could spot talent 10 miles away. I had no education. I did not go to art school. My drawing was so crude. I had shines on shoes like in Mutt and Jeff and Walt Disney. And she saw through that monstrous crudity and cultivated me, really made me grow up. And now it was time to do my own picture book. And I came to her with a title that was Where the Wild Horses Are. And she just loved that. It was so poetic and evocative. And she said, she gave me a contract based on Where the Wild Horses Are. And then it turned out, after some very few months, to her chagrin and anger, I couldn't draw horses. The whole book would have to be full of horses to make the book make sense. And when I tried a number of things, I remember the acid tone. She said, Maurice, what can you draw? Okay. Because she was investing in a full-color picture book. That was an enormous thing back then. And so I thought, well, things could be anything I could draw without negotiating things I can't draw. And then we were at, someone had died. My brother, sister, and I were sitting, Shiva, the Jewish ceremony. And all we did was laugh hysterically and remember our relatives who used to come from the old country, those few who got in before the gate closed, all on my mother's side, and how we detested them. The cruelty that children, kids are hard, and these people didn't speak English, and they were unkempt, their teeth were horrifying, nose unraveling out of their hair, unraveling out of their noses, and they'd pick you up, hug you and kiss you. Oh, we can eat you up. And we know they would eat anything. Anything. And so they're the wild things. And when I remember them, this discussion with my brother and sister, how we laughed about these people who we, of course, grew up to love very much, decided to render them as the wild things. My aunts and my uncles and my cousins. And that's who they are.
So the wild things are your extended
family.
Jewish
relatives.
Jewish relatives.
Jewish relatives.
Where the Wild Things Are, it created a big sensation. I mean, librarians would not put it in the shelves. In fact, there's one librarian who said, this is not a book you leave in the presence of sensitive children to find in the twilight.
Yes, it was a torrent of, keep this book away from children. This is
why?
I think probably it was the first American children's book. God knows I didn't set out to do this. It was my first picture book. But I was talking about kids I knew and me. A book, an American book, where the child actually daunts his mother and threatens her. No way. No way. And then on top of that, she puts him in a room and denies him food. No way. Mamas never do that kind of thing. Kids never get pissed at their parents. Unheard of. And the worst offense, he comes home, she leaves food for him, not punished. Not punished.
When you had Max, get mad at his mother? Did you know that this was going to enrage people?
No, my mother got mad at me all the time. It didn't seem an extraordinary thing at all. I mean, it seemed to me she was always mad. And in Yiddish, she called me the equivalent of wild thing and chased me all over the house. I used to hide in the street and hope she forgot before I crept up in the evening. It was all natural that your father took swipes at you, that you dodged, and your mother... Rough.
Were you ever sent to bed without supper?
I often went to bed without supper because I hated my mother's cooking. So to go to bed without supper was not a torture to me. If she was going to hurt me, she'd make me eat. Okay. That's true, too. But it was a really unkempt, unruly, small apartment, 3 children, father who worked so hard, mother who had problems emotionally and mentally, and we didn't know that. Your mommy's supposed to be perfect. She should be there for you, love you, kiss you. Every movie we ever saw, Claudette Colbert hugging her children, we knew what it should be like, and it wasn't, and we had no sympathy at all.
What I hear you describing is not a story that you just made up. It's a story you had experienced.
Yeah, well, that's what art is. I mean, you don't make up stories. You live your life. And I was not Max. I did not have the courage that Max had, and I didn't have the mother that Max had.
Who would
give you, love you, and this little scene, which is so trivial, happens at everybody's house, happens every Tuesday and Thursday. He has a fit, she has a fit. It'll go on until he's about 35, goes into therapy, wonders why he can't get married. Okay, because people often say, what happens to Max? And it's such a coy question that I always say, well, he's in therapy forever. He has to wear a straitjacket when he's with his therapist.
This is probably apocryphal, but I have to ask you this. I did hear, you were born in 28?
Yeah.
I did hear that you were seriously affected by the kidnapping and murder of the Lindbergh baby.
Oh, yeah.
Is that true?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was me. That was me entirely, in the sense of he was kidnapped in 32.
That's right.
And March 2nd, 1932. So I was 29, 30, about 3.5 years old, something like that. I remember everything. I remember I couldn't read, but the radio was always on. I remember Mrs. Lindbergh's tearful voice, where she was allowed to speak on radio to say that the baby had a cold, and would the man or men or women who took him rub camphor on his chest. It was a slight cold, but she didn't want it to get any worse. I remember that vividly. Her voice.
And you say it was you. Was this a child's appropriation of fear? Did you fear being kidnapped?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, fear of dying, because I was a very sickly child. My parents were immigrants. They were not decorous. They were not discreet. They always thought I was going to die. And my mother crying and yelling, because I was a very sickly baby. So I heard all this. I knew I was mortal from a very early age, okay? My grandmother, I was told, I don't remember, sewed me a suit of white with white stockings and white shoes, and I would sit on the stoop in front of the house with her so that the angel of death would pass over, because I was already an angel. I was all in white, so I would not be taken as long as I dressed in white.
You were dressed to fool the fates.
Yes. The Lindbergh thing was I'd just come off a very serious illness, and all the news was the Lindbergh baby. I made the queer association that since I was not meant to live long, and I've been told that, and if the Lindbergh baby is kidnapped, it can't die because it's a rich Gentile baby. It has blue eyes and blonde hair. Father is Captain Marvel, and the mother is the princess of the universe. And they live in a house in a place called Hopewell, New Jersey, where there are German shepherds, and where there are nannies, and where there are police. Who could climb up the wall, climb in a room, and take the baby out, and nobody know? How defenseless could babies be, even among the rich? Now, I could not bear the thought that that baby was dead. My life hung on that baby being recovered. Because if that baby died, I had no chance. I was only a poor kid. Okay? I mean, it doesn't make much sense to say it, but that's the equation. And when the baby was found dead, I think something really fundamental died in me. Some I don't know what to call it.
You say something died in you, but I'm a journalist, not a therapist, but for 2 bits I'll give you my opinion. I mean, what was born then were all these books, all these dark imaginings, all these dreams, all these projections of evil in the world, and of kids groping to cope with them.
I think that's why kids are drawn to it. Maybe there are lots of children, and certainly parents, who are not drawn to my work because they don't want to see those shadows. But I'm telling what it was like for me, and I know it was not unique for me. I've known many children, many unhappy and many disturbed children, who don't know how to talk about it. And you know, strangest thing, the fan mail I get from kids are asking me questions which they do not ask their mothers and fathers. Because if they had, why write to me, a perfect stranger? Why did the baby die and outside over there? Why is she being?
You know, in the culture when I was growing up, about the time you were growing up in New York, it was traditional to say if there was a death in the family, the little girl asked, "Where's Mommy? Mommy's in heaven." If the pet died, where's Midnight? In heaven. We put fig leaves over death.
Oh, well, sure. But
I mean, we need fig leaves, don't we?
We do. Of course, you can't say that's harmful because it's such an impossible question to deal with. It really is. And many children's books have tried to do it. The dead bird, the dead cat, the dead this, the dead that. I don't know that there's... I'm not saying that I have an answer to that. I imply it. I certainly don't spell it out. But they have to know it's possible things are bad. But they are surrounded by people who love them and will protect them, but cannot hide the fact that there is something bad.
You deal so often in your work with the courage of children.
Yeah.
What does it take for a child to have courage? And what do you mean by
innocence?
Innocence.
Enormous innocence, to really not know how evil the world can be. How can it be so evil?
Those themes of innocence and evil that so obsessed Maurice Sendak never played out more tragically than during the Holocaust. In his latest work, Sendak has teamed up with his good friend Tony Kushner, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his drama Angels in America, to create a children's parable about the question that hangs like a black cloud over history. Can it happen again? We'll be back in a moment to discuss what Maurice Sendak considers his magnum opus,